Hello, this is SimsBerrry, and this is my Machinima guide. This is the first part where I'm gonna focus on character design and planning. I'm sorry if I'm a bit of a mess. I'm not used to having to narrate things, so be patient with me. I'll try to tell you everything that I know that I think is useful. So for character design, there's not really much to say. I think you're basically just making a sim. That's all there is to it. The only things that I would point out is don't make a dozen of sims that look the same. I think it's really fun to experiment, make sims that look different from one another, and it also helps with giving a character a personality. So, you make a sim where they feel real, where their aesthetic, in a way, their design is similar to what you think the character they are would look like. So not everyone is gonna look the same, and I think that's the main thing. Don't make the same sims, and I think having a style is good. I think everyone has a style, whether they realize it or not. Just be aware that even though you have a style, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make sims of different ethnicities. I think a lot of people only make sims that are white because it fits their style. But don't do that, please. You can make sims your style and have them be different color. It's not gonna look weird or off, it's gonna look more realistic. This is the only tip that I would have. Now on to planning, which is one of my favorite things to do because it's the part that takes the longest. I have two different processes when it comes to planning. One is for long-term projects and one is for short-term. They're kind of the same. The only big difference is that when it comes to short-term projects, I mostly do everything in my mind, where when it comes to long-term projects, I write everything down, because long-term projects can take months or even years until they are completed. So it's good to write everything down just so you don't forget. So the first thing usually that I do when it comes to Machinima, long-term or short-term, is that I decide on a vibe. A vibe, I think everyone sort of understands what it is. It's just what I want to go for. Is it more dark? Is it more happy, sad? The sort of colors I want to incorporate, the animations, the music, whether I want it to be voiced or not, and I sometimes make a mood board, especially when it comes to long-term projects. For short ones, I just sort of picture everything in my head, but I usually do a mood board or two, or just take a few pictures which inspire me and give off that vibe that I want to go for. So for example, these are the ones that I went with for this particular project. This is what I do for this sort of setting. And then the next part is usually not useful for short-term projects, basically never. But for long-term, it's usually, a series or a movie, so the characters need to be fleshed out. And this part is the same thing that you would do if you were writing a book, for example. I fill in character sheets. I think they're super fun. You get to know your characters a bit more. I just fill like 50 questions, or 10 if you're lazy, about my character. I write down their backstory. If I haven't made the sim yet, I sort of dot down how I want the character to look like. Maybe find an actor that it resembles. Just something that gives my character a bit of personality. This thing I do, and I think it's really fun, is I go on, do some BuzzFeed quizzes or just random stupid quizzes that I found online, but I do them from the character's point of view, and this just helps me answer some more questions about them, questions that will probably never matter, but hey, you'll know this weird random fact about your character, and maybe somewhere you'll include it. You know, maybe your character is allergic to peanuts, and you just came up with this randomly while choosing their favorite ice cream flavor on a BuzzFeed quiz that guesses which Vampire Diaries character they are. You know, it's something completely stupid, but I think, me personally, it helps me a lot. And the big part that I do with long-term projects is planning. So very detailed planning of everything that will go down in a series. I usually start with just writing down everything that comes to my mind. Scenes, just a little moments, particular shots, the color of a dress of a character that will be in episode 5 of a series. You know, just little details, random details, totally scattered in the document. And then when I have a few of these details, I start combining them into episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, or for movies, I just make a timeline and I start putting them in and building the story until I have enough so I can say, okay, I think I have the sort of basis of my story done. And then I start revising, I look over it, I look over it until I'm satisfied, and then I start writing the script. So I usually do that only for long-term projects. For short-term, I usually don't use a script. My machinimas are usually just not voiced, but for the sparked machinimas, I wrote down a little script as well. But I didn't really care about the form or anything. So if you're making a short machinima, just write down the lines, don't care. But for long term, I think a proper script is always nice, especially if you're working with voice actors. Even if you're making a subtitle series or a series that has no subtitles or voices, if it's a longer project, just write everything down before your film, because it's gonna be so much easier and you'll know what to do. You won't be lost. But for simple little machinimas like this one, I just had a few shots in mind, so I picked a few animations and I sort of knew what I wanted to do with them. And yeah, this is the next part. So animations. There's a ton of custom animations online, so if I'm working on a short-term machinima, very short machinima, I usually choose all the animations that I'll use beforehand so that I sort of know what I want. For this particular video, I knew I wanted to use the studying animation and an animation of a sim lying on their back in bed, so I made sure that I downloaded these two, that I found them somewhere. Thankfully I already had them in the game. And yeah, this is all the planning that I do. So I really hope that this helped, at least helped you understand what my process is. You don't have to do all of this. I know it's a lot, especially if you're making your first machinima, but this is just sort of what I do. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned for part 2.